Biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 9:30 on Wednesday, the 3rd of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Littler is in the final. He has done it. 16-year-old Luke Littler has reached the World Darts Championship final. He takes to the Oki at 7 o'clock tonight with £500,000 up for grabs. We are right behind you, Luke the Nuke.
We certainly are. And in critical condition. If you're hoping to see an NHS doctor in the near future, big problem. The longest ever walkout in NHS history starts today as junior doctors put pay, yet again, over patients.
Tear down the blue wall. Remember the Liberal Democrats? Well, their leader, Sir Ed Davey, has vowed to seize Tory votes as he begins campaigning across Surrey. This morning, they're releasing a new poster.
And time for reform. The party's leader, Reform UK, Richard Tice, will be setting out his party's policies for 2024 later. We're going to bring you that live during this programme.
And teetotal 20s, a new study has found that 44% of 18 to 24-year-olds are switching to non-alcoholic drinks. We will tell you why.
Who'd have thought darts, even somebody like me, would get excited about it?
I know.
It's not my sort of thing at all, darts. I've never watched a darts match, I don't think, ever.
Have you not?
But this is exciting.
I think it's...
Come on.
It's brilliant.
16 years old. He'll be the youngest world champion ever.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. As always, first, though, your very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. Your top stories from the GB News this morning. The NHS could be stretched to breaking point today as junior doctors in England walk off the job in the health service's longest ever strike. An unprecedented 6 days of industrial action has now begun after talks between the government and the BMA union broke down. Junior doctors want a 35% pay rise, which would restore their real earnings to levels seen in 2008. The government says that's unaffordable, but insisted late yesterday that the door remained open for further negotiation. Dr Robert Lawrenson is the BMA Junior Doctors Committee co-chair. He says the strikes will continue until pay is improved.
We're very happy to talk about restoring our pay over a matter of years. We're very happy to do that over a period of time frame, and we don't necessarily need it all in one go. We're happy to sit down and have a collaborative conversation with the government, but they've pushed us out of the negotiation room. They don't want to talk with us, and the fact of the matter is the nurses rejected their pay deal. The nurses are still in dispute with the government, and the government, and to be honest, the whole country, have abandoned our nursing colleagues as well.
Lebanon's heavily armed Hezbollah group says the death of a top Hamas official in Beirut will not go without a response. Salah al-Aruri died in what Israel called a surgical strike against the Hamas leadership, insisting it didn't represent an attack on Lebanon despite taking place in Beirut. Hezbollah, which is allied with the Hamas terror group and backed by Iran, has been firing at Israel on its southern border since the attacks in October. The death of the deputy leader has ignited fears the fighting could spread into a wider regional conflict. Transport delays are to continue this morning after Storm Henk lashed parts of England and Wales with very strong winds and heavy rain. While those winds of up to 94 miles an hour were felt last night, downing trees and causing widespread damage. A woman was injured in southeast London when she was struck by a falling tree. Flood warnings remain in place, particularly in parts of Birmingham, Leicester and Northampton. Several train companies are warning of delays. And Luke Littler will make history tonight when he becomes the youngest player to compete in the final of the World Darts Championship. At just 16 years old, he beat Rob Cross 6-2 in the semi-finals last night at Alexandra Palace. He showed nerves of steel as he closed out the match in style, continuing his dream run into tonight's big tournament. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning. It's 9:34 on Wednesday, the 3rd of January. 16-year-old darts superstar Luke Littler has reached the World Championship final, defeating former world champion Rob Cross last night at Alexandra Palace. Here he is after the victory.
Unbelievable. Like I only set my goals to win one game and come back after Christmas, and I'm still here. Well, I don't have any GCSEs. Everyone's probably got more than me. In fact, I did pass me sport. But yeah, young dart players, hopefully they do look up to me, and if you do practice, then you could be where I am.
He's brilliant. I love him.
And he's so articulate. Actually, he's great. Although I must say, you'd have to pinch me if you're 16. He looks a little bit older than that, but there we are. Now he's taken the tournament by storm. He is in fact a prodigy, and he's going to become a media sensation, win or lose tonight.
That's right. This evening, of course, he takes on the world #1 ranked Luke Humphries. For those watching on TV, we're seeing Luke Littler and Luke Humphries together 4 years ago. So when Luke Littler was just 12 years old. Even at 12, he looks about 18. If he'd arrived on a dinghy, somebody'd be looking at his dental records, wouldn't they, to try and work out how old he is.
He'd have probably sank the dinghy, to be honest. Now, Sihab Mahmood works at Littler's favourite kebab shop, Hotspot, which is in his native Wakefield. And he had this, Warrington, and he had this message for Luke.
He loves the doner wrap, he loves it, he loves the kebab, like his famous phrase, but that's why I've also introduced his own kebab. It's called Luke the Nuke Special Wrap, I think it is. If you're watching Luke, you are going to...
Oh, it's brilliant, isn't it? So Luke is now 19 days from his 17th birthday as the youngest player to ever reach the World Darts Championship final. It is a proper David versus Goliath underdog story.
It's terrific. It really is terrific. Well, joining us now is the former World Darts champion, Steve Beaton. Steve, morning to you.
Morning.
Morning. Now, Steve, this is fantastic. People like me who've never had any interest in darts whatsoever, we've been completely swept up in all of this excitement. It's doing wonders for the sport of darts, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for the youngsters watching this now, it's unbelievable, really. I mean, you know, it's a dream come true for Luke, you know, from where he, you know, to get to the final now. But fair play to him. He qualified through his own steam, you know, he did well in the development tour, and now he's got a tour card for next year as well. But you know, he's done it all on merit, and you know, it's going to be an interesting final tonight. I'm looking forward to it.
How old were you, Steve, when you became world champion?
Sorry?
How old were you when you became world champion?
Oh, I wasn't that young. No, I think I was in 19. I was 32, so it was a bit later on in life for me.
Yeah.
Dance wasn't as big then, but it's got huge now.
For somebody like Luke, I'm thinking about other sports. You know, if you're doing Olympic sports, swimming, athletics, running, the parents play a big role. They're ferrying kids to and from training every day. Would Luke's sport have had that sort of impact on his family growing up?
Yeah, I mean, he's got great support behind him. His family's been brilliant, and I mean, that's what you need as a youngster in any sport. You know, you need your backing from your family. But he found the talent when he was younger, and it's just a matter of, like, you know, practicing and developing that talent. And he's proved that. You know, I mean, it's still unbelievable that he's only 16. You know, and he's got to the point now that he could be, you know, champion of the world.
How do somebody that young, Steve, copes with the pressure? Because it must be pretty scary, even for somebody like you who's been around a long time, sometimes to go on that stage, the cameras are on you, the audience is very passionate in the alley-pally, and yet he seems to be as cool as cucumber.
Yeah, I mean, he's dealt with everything, you know, marvellously. You know, I mean, from his first game on Ali Pali, you know, even his averages have improved, his performance has improved. You know, he looks like he's enjoying it up there, and you know, it's shown in his game. And you know, some players thrive on the audience. You know, they play better on in front of the camera, and I think he's one of them players.
Who's he playing tonight, and what chance does he actually have of winning?
He's playing Luke Humphries, who is playing absolutely out of this world this year. I mean, he's won the last 3. You know, TV tournaments. You know, he's on top form. I mean, he had 108 average last night. You know, so this final is going to be really, really good. You know, they're both. I think Luke had 106. He had 108 average last night. So I think we're in for a tremendous final.
They don't look, if you forgive me for saying so, Steve, like conventional athletes. Bev was talking about the Olympics earlier, and she knows a lot about Olympian sports. You know, he's not exactly slim, he's not very, very finely honed, is he, physique-wise, putting it mildly?
No, but I mean, like you say, you've got to remember he's 16, he'll be 17 in a few weeks now. But, you know, he's still young, he's still developing, you know, he's still growing. And, I mean, Luke was a lot heavier than he used to be. He's slimmed down a lot now to be able to compete. But, you know, if Luke feels comfortable, he feels comfy at, you know, the way he's carrying, then, you know, let him, you know, carry on. But, you know, I don't think that's affected his game at all. And, you know, he's just shown all the youngsters how to do it, really.
There is obviously the difference between, in a way, the world's top sports people and those that aren't, is coping under pressure. A lot of them behind the scenes could perform, be it on the track, in the pool, on a lake, or I imagine at the hockey behind closed doors. But it's coping with that pressure in that moment on that night, isn't it? It looks like Luke Littler is one of these young men who actually thrives on the pressure and does better when the crowd is making noise. And he looks like he loves it. Do you think that's the case?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. He's actually enjoying every moment. You know, even down to his finishing. You know, he's looking at the crowd to see, you know, which way he wants to go, really. And yeah, that's driving him on, I think. And you know, if he wins this tournament, you know, it's going to be unbelievable for him.
The world will be his oyster. Do you think, if you're honest, Steve, that he will win tonight? What's your hunch?
I've got a funny feeling he might, because, you know, he's dealt with everything this week. To him, it's just going to be another game tonight. And although Luke Humphries is playing very well, but I definitely would like to think that, you know, who knows, he's got a good chance, I think, definitely of winning it tonight, the youngster.
And if he wins this £500,000, will there be people around him, Steve, that will help him manage that sort of money at this age? Because there's always a risk, isn't there, that things can go a little awry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said earlier, he's got a great family around him. He's, you know, I think he's got his head screwed on. He loves the game. This is going to put, if he wins this tournament, it'll put him in the top 10 in the world. He's got the whole year ahead of him. He'll also qualify for most of the TV tournaments. You know, he's got a great couple of years ahead of him. So I don't think he'll go awry. I think he'll cope with it quite well.
Well, let's hope so. We will be watching, and we will be wishing him all the very best.
Well, great to talk to you. That's the former world champion. Great to talk to a world champion, isn't it?
Yeah,
world
very
champion.
nice. And I know people are snobby about it, aren't they? It's not a proper sport, but I think it is. If it's about skill, technique, ability to perform under pressure, how is that not the definition?
Yeah, who did we talk? Who was the darts player we had on a few weeks ago who won the darts championship more than any other darts player in the world?
I don't think I was there that day.
Somebody's going to whisper the ear in my hand at some point.
The darts players I know is Eric Bristow, Bobby George.
And
then there's a something van der What's-it. There's a famous Dutch guy.
Don't you remember Jockey Wilson?
Yeah. Vaguely.
And there was a woman player called Maureen Flowers who was dating Eric Bristow. They were an item.
Yes.
She was a blonde.
It's all coming back to me now.
Yeah.
Let us know your thoughts, even if you just want to say how brilliant it is that we've got a Brit on the top stage, one of the World
16
Championships tonight.
Brilliant and amazing.
Moving on. Junior doctors in England have started a 6-day strike after talks between the government and the British Medical Association broke down last month.
It's over. The dispute is over pay and conditions. The BMA senior docs say their pay has been cut by more than a quarter since 2008.
The Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, has issued a statement that says, I urge the BMA Junior Doctors Committee to call off their strikes and come back to the negotiating table so we can find a fair and reasonable solution to end the strikes once and for all.
Well, let's talk to now Junior Doctor, Dr. Basha Mukherjee. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You will have noticed yesterday, Doctor, that we had the highest ever post-war number of excess deaths in this country, 53,000. Do you accept some responsibility for that because of your continued strikes?
I will have to say that this is not just the responsibility of the doctor.
No, I'm asking if you do accept some responsibility.
I guess there's a consequence to every action. So for those people who have been striking, then there is a level of responsibility that we have to carry with us, yes.
I find it utterly extraordinary that at this time of year, in January, when we know that particularly the elderly are more at risk at this time of year, and there are people with immune systems that frankly are not working very well after the last 3 years, that this is the time in which doctors are choosing to take this strike action. Is this not better to at least get through the winter, maybe into the spring, and if you still feel the need to take the action in the summer, then do so then?
We were having this exact same conversation last summer as well, and this has been started since the beginning of spring last year. So it just seems that the government are not willing to listen to us, and there's no real right time. This exact conversation of the exact number of deaths and all the effect on the NHS, this was being had last year. I mean, the delayed action of the government, I'm absolutely appalled at.
Oh, that's a shame.
We've lost Dr. Basha Mukherjee. We'll try and get her back. But just to remind you, they've started the junior doctor strike today. It's 6 days of strikes. It is the longest strike in the history of the NHS.
The thing is, as well, the junior doctor's title is a little bit misleading,
Very
actually,
misleading.
because it's just basically...
We've got it back.
Good morning.
We've got you
Dr.
back.
Basha Mukherjee, I think you're back with us. Hello. Sorry about that. Would you just clarify as well, because junior doctors isn't really the right definition for who you guys are, is it? It's not as though you've just left university.
For people, anybody who's not a consultant, essentially. So they could be first year in the training program, or they could be many, many years into the training program. So there really is a very different level of experience in this whole terminology. And that's why I think this is a really important discussion, because it affects so many doctors, and so many doctors are part of this movement because we truly believe in it.
35% pay rise under the conditions at the moment of the fact that we have this terrible debt burden in the UK just sounds unreasonable.
Well, as the discussion's been had, it's not that we're asking for it all one go. We are happy to discuss and we're happy to negotiate. I think that's where the conversation has been about. Negotiate with us, bring us some alternatives or even something that is palatable that keeps all these doctors to stay in the NHS. I think what we're trying to avoid is the alternative, which is a mass exodus already happening of doctors leaving the country, working abroad, working in the private sector. They're still going to be doing patient care there, but it's just not going to be in the NHS, and we're going to be left over with leftover doctors, which we really don't want.
But isn't Beverly right? 35% is unreasonable, Doctor. You've been offered 10.3%. Inflation is currently running at 4.2%. We accept your pay has been squeezed over the last decade, but that's the same across the board in the public sector, and dare I say, in many parts of the private sector too.
But the conversation is about how much does that actually mean in real terms? It would have amounted to the exact amount which the government has already spent trying to essentially work against us by paying locum doctors to cover the shifts, which, well, you know, as you're saying, it's still resulting in these number of deaths and all the delays in the appointments and all the rest of it. So what are we really achieving here? The government needs to work with us, not against us. And right now, the doctors feel like we don't have anybody on our side.
Well, what are you achieving?
What are on our side?
Well, what are you achieving? This has been going on since the summer, and it's just led to a dramatic increase in waiting lists, the biggest increase in excess deaths in post-war history. What have you achieved, Doctor?
Well, I worry that by not being heard by essentially our employer, what this means is the employees, the doctors, they don't feel valued, and this is why they're all leaving. And that's part of my future plan as well. If we don't get a better
don't feel valued. It's an interesting thing when you say you don't feel valued, because I think what happened during the pandemic was this paradigm shift that we were told we had to save the NHS. It was a complete reversal of what the NHS is there to do, which is actually to save us. Is it fair to say that junior doctors now are just basically a little bit sulky about the fact that we're no longer clapping you on a Thursday night and hitting pans with spoons in order to applaud you? We have to go back to remembering that doctors are there, and the vast majority do an unbelievably good job. The doctors are there to look after the patient. It is not the patient's job to sit on a waiting list for 2 years so that you can get paid more money.
As much as I completely hear what you're saying, we have to remember that as doctors, we could do that exact same job in any other part of the world. And that's exactly what's happening. Doctors are leaving the country, working in different parts of the world where they do feel more valued. And essentially, they could be doing more good in the society if it was a perspective of doing charity.
OK, all right, we appreciate you joining us this morning. Junior doctor there, Dr Basha Mukherjee. Health and Social Affairs Editor of the Sunday Express, Lucy Johnson, is in the studio. Good morning, Lucy.
Good morning.
Did we not seem terribly sympathetic there, Andrew and I, to that lady?
Well, I question whether doctors really are leaving in huge waves, if there is really an exodus. The last time I looked at it, there was only a small proportion, I think 3%, and the ones that leave often come back. So that's a normal thing. They often threaten to leave, but I'm not...
Because they tell us this all the time, that people are going to Australia, sunnier climes, where they get more money. They don't work in an NHS, of course, in Australia, in sunnier climes.
Yes,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I understand the temptation to do that, but the figures... The last time I looked didn't stack up, didn't support that, so I'm not convinced. The junior doctors have an average of about £50,000 a year. That's what they earn on average. So when they do talk about their pay being the same as a pret-a-manger...
It's not true, is it?
Well, with out-of-hours pay and with bonuses, it adds up to about that. And, of course, they have huge career progression and salary advancement opportunities, which is very clear. So they will, as consultants, be earning a six-figure salary.
Will some of these NHS doctors also be doing private work on the side?
Well, that is very true, and many of them go on to do private work at weekends or on their days off. So
or on their strike days, presumably.
Well, that has happened, but I think that they can end up doing locum work. So I think that it is true that junior doctors do have huge debts. And that would be one thing that the government could look at. I mean, they can rack up about £100,000 worth of debt during their training. And if we do want to keep doctors here, and there is a threat of doctors leaving, we could do something like for every year they work, we pay back, the government pays back, or the NHS actually pays back a part of that debt, because it's quite difficult to service that debt with the interest rate so high. And I think, as you've said, 35% pay restoration. The Institute of Fiscal Studies has looked at their declining pay in real terms, and it doesn't match what they are claiming. So there is a debate, there's a dispute over that. The Institute of Fiscal Studies, I think, said it's 11 to 16% since 2010, and they say it's 35% since 2008-9. So, those figures, data can sort of show different things.
And we can argue about the numbers, can't we, Lucy, of course, but the real number that was driven home to me this week was that number yesterday we saw about the extra 53,000 excess deaths, the largest increase since the Second World War. That has to be, I'm not saying whether they should be on strike, but the strike has to be a major factor.
Well, it's really hard to tell whether the excess deaths are due to NHS, the problems, the tipping point now that the NHS is facing. It's difficult to know, but the fact is we have 7.1 million people on the waiting list.
Incredible.
We have over a million procedures cancelled. There will be people with fast progressing cancers that will not be diagnosed. People are really struggling. It's a dreadful situation. And the fact that, I was talking to Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary's office the other day, and they said, we will not come back to the table until they stop striking. That's
we need to move on, Lucy. I'm so sorry. Let us know your thoughts this morning. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. It is going to be a day with some sunny spells, but also blustery showers, and with that, the risk of some hail and some thunder, particularly for western parts. This is where we're going to see the heaviest, most frequent showers, but some showers feeding their way further eastwards as we go through the day. Some more persistent rain, likely for Orkney and Shetland. Could be some winteriness mixed in with this, so a little bit of sleet or snow. Perhaps also a bit of sleet or snow over the highest ground of Scotland, with some showery rain pushing in here. Temperatures likely to be down a little bit compared to Tuesday, but getting to highs of around 11 or 12 Celsius towards the south, albeit those blustery winds making it feel colder than that. As we go through the evening and overnight, sticking with the cloudy picture with further showery rain, sleet and hill snow across the north. Elsewhere we will see more showers across western parts again, further east drier with some clear breaks for a time. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places holding up in mid-single figures, but could be a little bit of a chilly start first thing on Thursday morning. As we go through the day itself, for many there will be fewer showers around compared to today. Across northern parts still quite cloudy here with outbreaks of showery rain. More central parts of England and Wales in particular, lots of fine sunny weather, but turning cloudy and wet in the south with some heavy persistent rain pushing up across southern parts, particularly southeastern parts as we go through the afternoon. Could cause some disruption to travel. Temperatures near normal for the time of year. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, thanks, Alex. Still to come, Reform UK leader Richard Tice is hosting a press conference this morning, setting out his party's policies for the general election, which we know is coming up very shortly. Meanwhile, Sir Ed Davey, remember him, Lib Dem leader, he's driving a van through Guildford with a new Lib Dem poster on it. I know you can't wait to see it. Contain your excitement.
Stay tuned.
It will be revealed.
For the poster. Don't go anywhere.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 3rd of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
In critical condition, good luck if you're trying to get an NHS appointment today. We've got the longest ever walkout in history, with junior doctors hitting the picket line again.
Littler hits the big time. 16-year-old Luke Littler is in the World Darts Championship final tonight. Here is the man himself.
I have any GCSEs, everyone's probably got more than me. In fact, I did pass me sport. But yeah, young dart players, hopefully they do look up to me, and if you do practice, then you could be where I am.
Time for reform. The leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, is going to set out his party's policies at a press conference this morning. Our political editor, Chris Hope, he's already there.
That's right, it's minor parties day. The Lib Dems are in the Blue Wall in Surrey, and here in Westminster, Reform UK is going to label Labour Starmageddon. More shortly.
And is it time for the Lib Dems? More like a time for a snooze. Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davies doing his own campaigning in Guildford this morning. I don't know why it entertains me so much. I think it's them launching a poster.
Can't wait to see it.
I shouldn't be so dismissive. I voted for the Lib Dems when Nick Clegg was was leader of the Lib Dems.
Why?
Look at his face. He's never going to speak to me again.
No.
I did.
God, why?
I was young and naive, and I thought that they were kind of a sort of middle ground party.
And do you remember they promised in the 2010 election they wouldn't put up university tuition fees, and they tripled them.
Yeah, I know,
in coalition.
I know. But aren't they funny? They're really lost in the political wilderness. They used to be at least a thorn in the side of the two main political parties. They're not even that anymore.
What we want to know about is your experiences with NHS. We've got this biggest ever strike by junior doctors, the longest in NHS history. Couldn't be a worse month, could it? January, when older people and more vulnerable people are particularly more vulnerable than ever. What are your own experiences? Have you had your perhaps cancer appointment cancelled? Let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, here is Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom.
Bev Turner, thank you. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The NHS could be stretched to breaking point today as junior doctors in England walk off the job in the health service's longest ever strike. An unprecedented 6 days of industrial action has now begun after talks between the government and the BMA union broke down. Junior doctors want a 35% pay rise, which would restore their real earnings to levels seen in 2008. The government says that's unaffordable, but insisted late yesterday that the door remained open for further negotiation. Dr Robert Lawrenson is the BMA's Junior Doctors Committee co-chair. He says the strikes will continue until pay is improved.
We're very happy to talk about restoring our pay over a matter of years. We're very happy to do that over a period of time frame, and we don't necessarily need it all in one go. We're happy to sit down and have a collaborative conversation with the government, but they've pushed us out of the negotiation room. They don't want to talk with us, and the fact of the matter is the nurses rejected their pay deal. The nurses are still in dispute with the government, and to be honest, the whole country have abandoned our nursing colleagues as well.
Lebanon's heavily armed Hezbollah group says the death of a top Hamas official in Beirut will not go without a response. Salah al-Arori died in what Israel called a surgical strike against the Hamas leadership, insisting it didn't represent an attack on Lebanon despite taking place in Beirut. Hezbollah, which is allied with the Hamas terror group and backed by Iran, has been firing at Israel on its southern border since the attacks in October. The death of the deputy leader has ignited fears the fighting could spread into a wider regional conflict. Transport delays are to continue this morning after Storm Henk lashed parts of England and Wales with very strong winds and heavy rain. Those winds, up to 34 miles an hour, were felt last night, downing trees and causing widespread damage. A woman was injured in southeast London when she was struck by a falling tree. Flood warnings remain in place, particularly in parts of Birmingham, Leicester and Northampton. Several train companies are warning of delays. Weather journalist Nathan Rowell says passengers should check their plans before setting off.
Rail companies are warning there are going to be disruptions this morning, and that is because some of the trains are in the wrong place from yesterday. That is a quote from the rail networks. Because of the disruption yesterday, the trains weren't able to get back to where they should be to start off today. So there are going to be disruptions, and there are hundreds of flood alerts and flood warnings out from the Environment Agency right across the country in the aftermath of Storm Henk. So, yeah, we are only a couple of days into 2024, and once again, we are talking about storms and disruption and flooding and everything that goes with it.
A list of more than 150 people with links to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein is to be made public soon. It follows a ruling by a judge in New York that will see previously redacted names revealed for the first time. It's understood many of the names have already appeared in other court documents, and appearing on the list does not necessarily indicate any wrongdoing. A long-time associate of powerful politicians and business people, Epstein preyed on girls as young as 14. He died in jail in 2019 before he could be tried on sex trafficking charges. More young people are making the switch to non-alcoholic drinks. A study carried out by YouGov found 44% of those aged 18 to 24 consider themselves to be either occasional or regular drinkers of alcohol alternative. That's up from 31% in 2022. It also found younger generations are now the most sober age group overall, with 39% preferring not to drink at all. That's after a survey in November found 1 in 10 British drinkers feel they have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And Luke Littler will make history tonight when he becomes the youngest player to compete in the final of the World Darts Championship. At just 16 years old, he beat Rob Cross 6-2 in the semi-finals last night. He showed nerves of steel as he closed out the match in style, continuing his dream run into tonight's big tournament. And the history-making finalist has some words of wisdom for anyone who dreams of following him.
Unbelievable. Like I only set my goals to win one game and come back after Christmas, and I'm still here. Well, I don't have any GCSEs. Everyone's probably got more than me. In fact, I did pass me sport. But yeah, young dart players. Hopefully, they do look up to me, and if you do practice, then you could be where I am.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio, and on your smart speaker by saying "Play GB News." Now back to Andrew and Beth.
Very good morning, 10:07. Thank you for getting in touch at home, and thank you for carrying on watching and listening to us here on GB News. We are going to break all the records in 2024 for the number of people who are tuning in, and you are a big part of that on this show. It's all thanks to Andrew. Pamela says...
She doesn't mean a word, that.
I am 100%, I do. I am 100% behind the NHS strikes. The whole public sector are still paying for the bankers crashing the economy in 2008. Year-on-year real-term pay cuts. We've had enough. Many good staff are leaving. Not everybody's agreeing with that. Tony says, stop making out the junior doctors' strikes to be selfish. Actually, you do agree with that, Tony. We're having to sub our junior doctor's son because he's paying £1,000 a month for a room in London, paying for his own equipment and paying for membership fees just to let him practice, let alone the debt. Come on, they deserve a pay rise. But Bruce has said the junior doctors are a moral disgrace. Innocent, sick people are suffering because of their selfish action. I've got no sympathy. I'm sickened when I see them laughing outside of hospitals. A lot of you are in that kind of reflecting that sort of feelings about them.
Well, it's perfect time to talk to our next guest.
I think so. Right, so junior doctors in England have begun a 6-day strike until next Tuesday after talks between the government and the BMA broke down last month.
It's over paying conditions. As you know, the BMA says junior doctors' pay has been cut by more than a quarter since 2008.
And the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, has appealed for the strikes to be called off, but warns the BMA need to be realistic.
I was very disappointed when the Junior Doctors Committee walked out of our negotiations and then called these strikes. We know that they have a very real impact for people, including, of course, the 88,000 appointments that were cancelled in the last 3 days of industrial action just before Christmas. And so I very much hope that the Junior Doctors Committee will call off the strikes, and then we can get back round the negotiating table to ensure that we can find a settlement for patients.
Well, joining us now is barrister and columnist for Perspective, Sam Fowles. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning.
It's interesting looking at our inbox. I would say that it's 80% have lost sympathy with the junior doctors, 20% still on side. Who's going to win this?
I think it's difficult to say, but I think it's a real shame that to see it framed like this, really, because we as a nation. I remember going outside every day during the pandemic and banging pots and pans and clapping for carers, and there was this sort of upswell of gratitude to the NHS, and quite rightly so. You know, these people were risking their lives. They were wearing bin bags because they didn't have enough PPE, and yet when they say OK,
I would take issue with how exaggerated the threat to these young healthy people was. But carry on.
Yeah, but then when they say, put your money where your mouth is...
Don't get us started on that, which you'll never get a finish, let me tell you.
But this is the problem, isn't it? It does all come back to that. I said there was a paradigm shift where it seemed like the power suddenly went to the doctors, and we are supposed to be grateful for them. We are grateful for them. They're remarkable. However, we've lost sight of the fact that the NHS is there to protect the British public.
Well, and I agree with that, but the thing is, it's not for doctors to sort of voluntarily protect the British public out of charity. It's for the government. The government is supposed to run the NHS. The government is supposed to protect us. It's supposed to provide us with healthcare. And part of doing that involves paying the people to work in the NHS the sort of wage that they're willing to work for.
Don't you think, Sam, it's unconscionable that with 7 million people on waiting lists, that they're going on strike in January? The worst time of the year. They did it just before Christmas. This is when older, more vulnerable people are at their most vulnerable, and they're going strike for 6 days for more money.
Well, part of this, though, is...
Do you not find it unconscionable?
I find it unconscionable they've been put in that position. This is the result of government anti-strike legislation that has limited the time that you can strike. And so if junior doctors want to pursue this dispute this year, they have a ticking clock after which they're not allowed to strike anymore, according to the law. So
it's a pity it's not in now, in my view.
Well,
if it was in now, there wouldn't be this strike. We wouldn't have had, only in the last 24 hours, the figures showing the highest excess deaths figure post-war of 53,000 since the war. That's got to be linked to the strike, Sam.
Well, we've had highest excess deaths figures every year, even before the pandemic. I can't quote accurately, but it going back several years before the pandemic. Every year was the highest excess death figures in the
definitely.
NHS.
2022 has been the highest excess deaths we've had, and we're looking at high figures as well this year.
So
it's partly to do with this. It's also partly to do with some people having bad reactions, long-term and short-term, to the COVID vaccines. It's partly to do with suicide because of lockdowns. It's partly to do with people not having medical attention during lockdowns. That's a complex picture. But it certainly plays a part now. This is going forward, we're going to see these people who can't access cancer care. We've just had a statement. There's been a statement out this morning from Professor Yvonne Doyle, the former medical director at Public Health England. And she said that, you know what old people need to do to help the NHS? Stay warm. Stay warm. That is one of the leading medics in this country saying doctors can be on strike, but the old people need to just put on a cardigan. This is 2023 and we're acting like a medieval country.
Yeah, and but we've been acting like a medieval country for a decade now. Every year of my adult life, there has been a crisis in the NHS in the winter. This isn't something that has just come about because of COVID. It's not something that's come about because of the strikes. It's something that happens every single year. Even before COVID, we had the highest waiting lists in decades that we had to deal with. So this is not something that is being imposed just by the junior doctors. And I don't think it's fair to be asking the junior doctors to essentially mop up the mess that politicians have been making for a decade now.
But Sam, let's talk about the money, because the junior doctors are saying, and I think they're willfully misleading the public by saying we're not getting much more pay than staff in Pret a Manger. That's been repudiated completely by that fact-checking organisation.
Yeah.
And we were talking to somebody earlier. Even the Institute for Fiscal Studies, independent, respected, says their pay hasn't fallen back by 35% in the last decade. It's more like 15%. They've been offered 10.3%. That's not bad, Sam, when you consider how most of the public sector, and let's not forget the private sector, have been squeezed and squeezed. Why are they got to be treated so differently?
Well, I think you need to pay people what it's going to take to bring them into the profession. And if you're a young, bright kid right now, you could think, right, I could be a banker and I'm going to start on 55. I could be a consultant, a management consultant. I'm going to be going to start on 50. I could work in software. I'm going to work in the high 40s. Why should I go and be a junior doctor and start on 37?
Because they've got a vocation.
But again,
because they want to help people, they want to care. That's why people go and work in the charitable sector, Sam, rather than going to work in the financial sector, because people have that ambition and noble aim.
Yeah, but again, that's coming back to saying that people should just, out of the kindness of their hearts, do this job that, for me, is more important, I think, than banking or almost any other job, potentially including my own.
Yeah.
You didn't have to say it that quickly.
Yeah, sorry. Barristers. Don't get me started on barristers.
We're asking them to do this incredibly important job and saying you essentially need to do it partly as a volunteer. And they are working as volunteers for an enormous amount of their time.
They do make money, though, like on the side, don't they? There are ways in which these doctors can, bulk up their earnings by doing extra private work here and there, doing extra hours in the hospital. There are ways. I don't think this figure of 50,000...
They do a lot of shift work, which bumps up the side. I know nobody's saying they're paid perhaps as much as they deserve, Sam, but why withdraw Labour for 6 days in January and lose public support, which is the price they're paying?
Because I think they don't have any other choice. We've got a government that is not prepared to make them an offer that is.
Well, hang on. Have you heard anything from the next government? We heard Nick Thomas-Symonds on this programme this morning. He's in the shadow cabinet saying a Labour government would not pay them 35%.
Yeah, and I think that's a shame. I disagree with Nick Thomas Simmons just as much as I disagree with Victoria Atkinson. But I think what I did like about what he said is we take 35% as a starting point, and then we get round the table to try and avoid strikes. And I think that's what the government needs to do here.
And you know what? Labour might pay them 35%, and they will continue to cripple the economy in doing so. Then we will all end up paying it in the long run. Sam Fowles, thank you.
Always lively to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
And Happy New Year.
You too.
Now, back to darts. Teenage Luke Littler's sensational run at the World Darts Championship continued. He beat Rob Cross to storm into the final.
If he's crowned king, the 16-year-old says he'll cash in the $500,000 prize money and treat himself to a doner wrap with mayonnaise and lettuce from his favourite kebab shop, Doner Kebab. I think, actually, with that much money, you can buy the flipping kebab shop and probably the entire street it's in.
When did you last have a Doner Kebab?
I haven't had one for about 45 years.
We might have one in celebration.
It was horrible.
Well, GBNews Sports broadcaster Paul Coit joins us this morning.
And I've had my doner this morning, by the way, and I did have my doner this morning.
Can we also... I don't want to change the mood of this interview, but we've got two British lads in this final. And we are at a grave risk of neglecting to give attention to the guy that's been training for more years. Another Luke.
Luke Humphries. Yeah, Luke Humphries. He's the world number one. He became the world number one when he won his semi-final. 6-0. So it's...
He's not very old either.
He's 28. He's 28. Compared to Luke Littler, he's extremely old.
Right.
But... It's the story, obviously, is Luke, because he's a kid. He's 16 years old. I don't know about you, but I look at him and I'm seeing a 35-year-old.
I know.
I'm beginning to think that there's some
all the doner kebabs, is it?
It is those. But the thing is, I'm wondering if there's like some conspiracy within the PDC that's saying, I know, we'll get this 35-year-old. We'll pretend he's 16. The whole world is going to take notice.
Great drama.
It is great drama because everybody's interested in the dance.
Is it because he is so ordinary? He's very down to earth.
Yeah.
He comes over in a very lovely, nice manner, doesn't he? He's very articulate.
Yeah.
And he's not used to the cameras. And yet he's pretty used to them in the last week or so.
Yeah, it's the age. Because if you look at darts players, generally, they're all of those things you've explained. But for someone that's 16, and also this is his advantage, because the 16-year-old, he has no fear.
Yeah.
The amount of sports people that I've spoken to that said, you know, when we broke through, I played in cup finals, had no fear, and it's when you get older, that's when you start to worry. So at the moment, it's almost like there's the press conference. He seems almost like, well, this is what I do. I've, no disrespect, but it's been quite easy. I've just gone up, thrown the darts, no problem.
Is it a proper sport?
Yeah, I think it is. I really do. I thought I brought this up earlier because anything that you watch is competitive and it has you on the edge of your seat and you find yourself cheering and getting behind, that you can't argue that's not a sport.
Skill and repetitive practice for many, many years, not as many in his case, actually, as his rival.
But nerves of steel, Bev, too.
But nerves of absolute steel. But you know what? Sport, you will know better than any of us, Paul, is paved with young, successful prodigies.
Yes.
For whom life did not turn out well. I mean, George Best is a great example that I can bring to mind. Paul Gascoigne didn't do so well, did he, under that sort of pressure and spotlight? In a way, maybe Luke, I'm just becoming a bit maternal here. This is why maybe Luke Littler needs a bit more time to grow into this spotlight. Let's have the other Luke win his £500,000 tonight.
I said exactly that this morning.
Did you?
I wouldn't be against the fact that, and I think there's part of me that thinks it may be the best thing for Luke Littler to not win this.
I agree.
A friend of mine was in the audience I think it was for the quarter-final, and was standing there and got tickets, and it was through a friend, and was standing very near to Luke's family. This is Luke Littler. Anyway, one of the members of the family said, how comes you're here? Are you a friend? And he said, no, I've just, someone gave me a ticket. And they went, are you press? And they said, well, no. And he said, well, because we've had a lot where people, they're knocking on doors, they're going round neighbours, they're trying to find everything they can about him, because obviously
because he's a prodigy.
Happens. Exactly, and everybody wants to know as much as they can, but when you're 16, like you, Bev, that does worry me.
He's still a child.
He is a child, of course.
He's not old enough to vote. He's not old enough to buy alcohol or even drink alcohol without his parents' approval, I think.
For advertising, for example, when you see him walk down, they've got the big badges and it's sponsored by Paddy Power and they're all waving to all the crowd. He can't have that badge because he's 16 and therefore not old enough to advertise any gambling. So he's got like a cancer research. So it's all those little things that they have to be careful of because he's only 16. For example, they're probably going to make the sets shorter because it's past his bedtime. So because they can't.
You're winding me up now.
Okay, fair enough. But you know, it's so late. But you've got to remember.
And we've already seen nice pictures of his girlfriend.
21, he's got an older woman girlfriend.
He's done it right there. Yeah, it's a 16-year-old. Yeah, absolutely.
Prediction.
I think it's going to be very close, but you know, Luke Humphries is the world #1. He's playing unbelievably well. He got better averages than Luke Littler got.
Where's he from?
He's from Newbury.
Okay,
So
Reading
he's from
boy.
Newbury.
Yeah.
But he'll be like the pantomime ugly sister if he wins.
I know,
I'm
poor
afraid.
guy.
It's
He's
not
becoming
fair.
like the pantomime villain, isn't he?
We had Rob Cross on Breakfast yesterday, and he came on, and I said to him, you know, the thing is, you do realise that everybody wants you to lose.
Yeah.
And he said, I know that, and you could see that with the crowd, because you're thinking the kid's up there, everybody wants him to win. It's going to be tough, but I do actually think that Luke Littler will win this.
Do you?
I do think he will, because I think he's got... If he starts losing, and he lost the first set yesterday against Rob Cross, it's not going to affect him, because he said, I didn't think I'd get even past the first round.
Because the pressure's on the other bloke.
The pressure is on the other bloke. He's the world #1. He's the one that's older. He probably wants it, and he's wanted to win that world title longer. Luke's going to go out there and enjoy playing.
Psychologically fascinating, isn't it? Am I right in thinking that Luke Humphries, I thought that our guest earlier alluded to it, used to be quite a big boy himself and got very fit and lost a lot of weight?
That's right, yeah.
What else do we know about him?
Well, all we know is that he's had the best year he's ever had. He's never got past the 4th round in the world title, in the World Championships. I think it's about 7 or 8 World Championships he's played in now. He's never been as good as he is now.
Right.
And this is the time if he's going to win it. So, and he nearly got knocked out.
Guy.
Very nearly got
Again,
knocked out.
poor guy. He should be the one on the front page of the papers today, really, shouldn't he?
But if he wins, let's say Luke Humphries wins, who do you think will be on the front page of the paper? It'll probably be Littler loses instead of Luke Humphries wins.
And did you see the headline on The Sun this morning?
The boy Donna Good.
Pretty clever, that.
That's
Yeah.
the boy
Clever,
Donor Good.
Yeah, Donor Good,
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
And tomorrow there'll be something about Sweet 16.
There will be,
Yeah.
absolutely. So anyway, he's got a great future ahead of him. It's always tricky, you know, he's got to try and keep it together. It's going to be a big change for him, but we wish him well.
And either way, we've got 2 British lads in the World Championship final. That in itself.
And just to show I know the
celebration.
jargon, 180.
There you go.
It's literally all he knows.
That's it.
Right, up next. Reform UK and the Liberal Democrats are both trying to raise their public profile this morning. I think the Lib Dems will be happy with 180 votes, wouldn't they? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Morning. It is 10:27 now. No doubt, if you're in the south of England, you will have noticed the weather yesterday afternoon. Well, the police have confirmed that a motorist died after a tree fell on the car that he was driving in Gloucestershire yesterday during those very strong winds and heavy rain.
Gloucestershire police said the man was in his 50s and the incident was on the Tetbury Road near Kemble, which is near Cirencester. We'll have more on that storm later, which actually wiped out hundreds of train services yesterday.
It was extraordinary. I live in West London and there were trees on the road, boughs off the trees all over the place. Now, over the past 12 months, Reform UK has doubled their poll rating, with some polling organisations putting them on as much as 10%.
This morning, party leader Richard Tice is going to host a press conference. He's going to set out Reform's strategy for the year ahead, which will be general election year.
Our political editor, Christopher Hope, is live at the event. Good morning, Christopher. Now, Reform, for those who know them, and people who watch this channel have seen Richard Tice hosting his show here, Reform really does manage to land with a lot of the electorate. They like what they stand for. They like the simple messaging. But isn't the big challenge for them to make more people aware of who they are?
Yeah, the Reform UK has about 10% of the votes at the moment, according to people polling 4 days ago. The same number as Liberal Democrats, and they're much more well known in Westminster. Now, today is minor parties day. The Lib Dems are out in Surrey. They're in Jeremy Hunt's seat. They're in Michael Gove's seat of Surrey Heath, trying to persuade Tories to come back to the Lib Dems, who may have gone over there in the past decade or so. But here in Westminster, we're hearing from Richard Tice, the Reform UK leader. He's going to say that Labour is offering what we call a Starmageddon if the party wins the election likely later this year. He calls the party ready to inflict a catastrophic cocktail of economic incompetence and cultural damage to the UK. The big question for the Reform UK is how can they cut through? I've been following UKIP and then the Brexit Party and now Reform UK for about 20 years in politics. They don't know where any voters are. That's the problem. All the main parties have the data, they know where their voters live. All Reform have got is basically a strong message that can appeal to the right of the party, but they can win, millions, 4 million votes in 2015 and be left with one single MP. The problem is how do they cut through? And they're not sure they can do that yet, but they are trying to make a bigger message on tax cuts and to the right of the Tory party. They are a problem for Tories, but also increasingly a problem for Labour.
Chris, wouldn't they make more of a cut-through if they wheeled out probably their biggest electoral asset, Nigel Farage, who is something like the honorary president of Reform UK?
Well, we're expecting the party to reveal its candidate for the Wellingborough by-election today. Expected to be called because, of course, more than 10% of voters there want a recall by-election after Peter Bone fell foul of Commons rules. Who will that candidate be? Now, some would say, were it to be Nigel Farage, it'd be his 9th attempt to be an MP. Can he face another rejection? That's the question for him. But insiders tell me that if Farage did come back to run the party, they could push up their support from 10% to 15%. Now, 15% means maybe 5 million votes. If you get 5 million votes, you do get a couple, 2 or 3 MPs. Is he willing to do it? We don't know. He's keeping his powder dry for now. I'm not expecting that today. It's probably more likely some good language from strong language attacking the Labour Party, trying to have a go at the Tory Party, and probably candidates from Reform. But Reform UK is a problem for the Tory Party. What they do about it is drawing away support from the right of the party, and that's the issue there for Rishi Sunak.
OK, thank you very much, Christopher. That's exciting. They're going to announce a candidate for the by-election. Don't go anywhere.
And Wellingborough is a seat where they had one of the biggest votes for Brexit in the country.
Yeah, and that, of course, Reform UK, formerly the Brexit Party, to some degree.
And that by-election has been caused by yet another Tory MP being forced to stand down because of a scandal.
Interesting. Don't go anywhere. You're going to be... this is the only channel we're going to be looking at that in the detail. Davies, Surrey siege. Also next, the Lib Dem leader will target the Tory heartland with a bold new campaign.
Well, there's the poster, if you're listening on the radio. Ed Davies, Tory removers, picture of Rishi Sunak.
Is that the poster?
Thrilling. How much do you think they paid for that? Ask your money back.
If you're listening on the radio, we will describe it in more detail after the break. Sir Ed will address the public in Guildford. Get yourself some coffee, you might need it.
You might seem a bit stronger.
All that and more after your morning's news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Beth, thank you. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The NHS could be stretched to breaking point today as junior doctors in England walk off the job in the health service's longest ever strike. An unprecedented 6 days of industrial action has begun after talks between the government and the BMA union broke down. Junior doctors want a 35% pay rise, which would restore their real earnings to levels seen in 2008. The government says that's unaffordable, but insisted late yesterday the door remains open for further negotiation. Dr Robert Lawrenson is the BMA's Junior Doctors Committee co-chair. He says the strikes will continue until pay is improved.
We're very happy to talk about restoring our pay over a matter of years. We're very happy to do that over a period of time frame, and we don't necessarily need it all in one go. We're happy to sit down and have a collaborative conversation with the government, but they've pushed us out of the negotiation room. They don't want to talk with us, and the fact of the matter is the nurses rejected their pay deal. The nurses are still in dispute with the government, and to be honest, the whole country have abandoned our nursing colleagues as well.
A motorist has died after a tree fell on the car he was driving in yesterday as strong winds and heavy rain battered the UK. Gloucestershire police say the 50-year-old died on Tetbury Road near Kemble. Transport delays are to continue today as the clean-up following Storm Henk continues. Flood warnings remain in place, particularly in parts of Birmingham, Leicester and Northampton. And Luke Littler will make history tonight when he becomes the youngest player to compete in the final of the World Darts Championship. At just 16, he beat Rob Cross 6-2 in the semi-finals last night. He showed nerves of steel as he closed out the match in style, continuing his dream run into tonight's big tournament when he takes on the new world #1, Luke Humphries. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2625 and €1.1546. The price of gold is £1,629 and 14 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,697 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, research suggests that the younger generation is now the most sober age group overall, with 39% of them not drinking alcohol at all.
Blimey. I used to be sober. Somebody said your worst day of my life. I wouldn't know, I can't remember it.
Well, I said yesterday, I'm doing dry January.
So am I.
And it is dragging on.
It's only day 3.
I know. That's no wonder I'm so miserable. Right, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
(10:39), you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, and the noisy bit in the corner you could hear was the former...
Noisy what?
Stephen
The
Pound.
noisy what? Okay, good.
Stephen Pound being very noisy over there. And of course, former Daily Star editor and GB News star, Dawn Neeson.
Being very civilised and quiet in the corner.
Well, that's unlike you.
This is not going to last, is it?
No.
Right, let's kick off with a bit of immigration. Don't forget, if you're just tuning in, we're going to be taking Richard Tice at the Reform Party conference live in about the next sort of 20 minutes or so, so don't
And they
go
are going to
anywhere.
announce their candidate for the Wellingborough by-election. Now, this is one they will think they've got a strong chance of winning. It's a very strong Brexit seat. It's been caused, the by-election, by the resignation, the false resignation of Peter Bone. Another scandal. I can't even remember what the scandal involved, but it was a scandal.
Yeah.
Involved himself and one of his aides in a hotel room in Gibraltar.
It's funny how you know. It's funny how you always know the details. He always knows the details.
It's a fabulous gossip, though, isn't
He
it,
emerged
Steve?
from the shower.
Oh, stop. Enough detail.
Is this all
People having their
allegedly?
Late breakfast.
No.
Well, no, he's gone.
Oh.
He was found guilty by a Commons committee.
Oh, I
which
see.
he
Does
says...
he still deny it, though?
Yes, he did.
Well...
Yeah, and you can't appeal against these comments.
Let's move on from shower scenes.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak has refused to back James Cleverly's target of stopping all the small boat crossings this year. They just can't get their ducks in a row, can they, on this issue?
I know. People used to say, you know, back in the day when Mandelson and co used to run the Labour Party, and we used to have these little pages which told us when to breathe and when not to breathe and things. But we were on message.
You were.
I have to say, nobody is more hysterically off message than this. But this really is supermarket trolley time. You know, look, if there's one thing they should be absolutely, utterly, seriously on message about, it's this immigration issue. The statistics already are being held up to ridicule because it looks like they're rubber stamping all the applications and just waving them on through. So this is one time when the country actually demands this, and the Conservative Party needs it. And quite frankly, they should really, as you say it so eloquently, get their ducks in a row.
And the James Cleverly told us that the legacy backlog, i.e. people who came in illegally across the channel before June 2022, that was 92,000, had been cleared. What he didn't tell us is since June 2022, the backlog has gone up to 96,000, even higher than where we were before.
Well, they used to, it was about 15 years ago, there's a thing called the Regularisation of Overstayers Protocol, which the Home Office, which basically meant you kept your head down.
Cooking the books.
It didn't matter how crooked you were, how illegal you were, you got a stamp because you came in.
Is that your chair squeaking?
It is.
I'm sorry.
We're going to have to find some more for that.
Stephen, chair or your knees?
Well, thank God it's a chair. That's all I can say, because I've had a decent dinner last night.
Dawn, I think there are growing questions about Cleverly's judgment. You know, he made that really silly gaffe. I mean, I know he was trying to be funny the other day when he said at a press conference about the fact that he would give his wife a sort of a sedative so that she didn't realise there were other men in the room. But obviously, he's dealing with issues of date rape drugs.
He says really stupid things, like, and obviously there's the use of the S word. But the thing is with this, I mean, I think Rishi Sunak has actually been sensible on this because he can't back it. No one can say, I'm going to stop all small boats by the end of the year.
So just to be clear, that's exactly what Cleverly said. He said, my target is to bring it down to zero. I mean, I'm completely committed. He was talking on LBC this morning.
Which is absolutely impossible. So I think Rishi Sunak is right. I mean, I agree with Stephen. There's so much disarray in the party. It's ridiculous. But he can't say that that's confirmed. I mean, the small boat crossings are down, aren't they? We had 29,500.
Too many?
Too many, but 36% lower than the record for 2022.
But is that, in your view, Dawn, because of the tough arrangements with France, Turkey and the arrangements with Albania, or is it because we've had very strong winds?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, the last boat crossing, unless there's been one today, was December the 16th, where 55 made it across. And since then, we've had just non-stop storms, haven't we? So that explains why no one's crossing. But, I mean, it is a bit... It is, I think, almost good news that they are down, at least. It's better than being up, isn't it? For whatever the reason. I think, that obviously, the last few weeks we've had bad weather. But I think there is something, I think, whether it is that, you know, the millions of pounds we've spent to France, or it is the Rwanda threat.
You see, I still think Rwanda is a deterrent, Stephen. I know it's not on the statute book, but I do. I mean, when I was in Ireland recently, I was talking anecdotally to people who said the number of migrants in Ireland now, arriving in Ireland, is higher because people don't want to go to Rwanda.
Well, you know, there's been an issue for quite a while, and you know, recent cases have actually brought this to prominence, and obviously the situation in Dublin 3 or 4 weeks ago. Look, but the reality is, on the one hand, the government is saying Rwanda is a marvellously safe place. It's perfectly legal, perfectly legitimate to send people there, and, you know, they can sit on the veranda sipping sundowners and having a great old time. On the other hand, they're saying it's some ghastly hellhole where you're going to be brutalised. So you can't have it both
the United
places.
Nations have been sending refugees to Rwanda for some years. And about 2,000 this year alone, Steve.
Andrew, we've been accepting...
And yet the UN are opposed to our policy on Rwanda.
But people are actually coming from Rwanda and seeking asylum in this country. Rwandans are. But look, I mean, the different thing is, when James Cleverly was first appointed, we always called him Cleverly by name, but not. And, you know,
well, you might have.
Well, I think, to be honest, it was the Tories that did.
Let's just move on. Because we are going to be, as we said, we're going to be taking this press conference live with the Reform Party. But I want to also talk about the chaos that has ensued following the fireworks display on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
So Sadiq Khan Sold it.
Electioneering.
London, brought to you by the Lord Mayor, he said, in fireworks. No, it wasn't. It was brought to us by the taxpayer.
The London taxpayer.
Yeah. Now we know what all the money from ULEZ has gone to. It's been an extravagant firework display.
And I think it was outrageous to spend taxpayers' money promoting himself. The mayoral elections are May, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Promoting himself, vote for me, and that's all
all it was.
It was disgraceful.
And what really annoyed me about that is at the very time he was boasting about how London is diverse and inclusive and everyone's free to be what they want and who they want, especially if they're carrying a knife, because that poor little lad lost his life on Primrose Hill just as Mayor Khan was coming out with all that claptrap, to be honest with you. And he was the 23rd child, teenager, murdered in London, 18 by knife crime.
Yeah. I know.
Gone up so much under Mayor Khan. I mean,
have we heard a word of regret from him on that little boy being killed? I mean, 16, he's a little boy, out with his mates and his family, stabbed to death. Terrible.
I was watching an interview with his, I think his granddad.
His granddad.
Harry Pittman, I think.
Just so heartbreaking.
Awful. Middle of 5 children.
I mean, you're an ex-London MP. It was outrageous, and I don't know how he's allowed to get away with it. It's called gerrymandering.
Yeah. I have to say, I actually turned over and watching Rick Astley, to watch this, and to my horror, up came this big thing about happy birthday NHS, 75 years, and I think about gay marriage and I mean, and then he's not the Lord Mayor. I'd like to think he was the Lord Mayor.
Yeah.
London Mayor.
He certainly is. But I thought, what on earth is all this about? And then the number of people I've spoken to, you talked about your anecdotal experience in the west of Ireland. I was talking to so many people who said they couldn't even get into their allotted spaces. They had tickets, coloured tickets, so pink and blue and green. They couldn't get there, and the police were saying finally about 8 o'clock, look, go home. It's chaos.
Yeah.
It's been so I'd like a little more organisation and a little less self-aggrandisement.
That wasn't Sadiq Khan's fault. No. There were fake tickets. City Hall fake tickets doing around. Nothing.
Never his fault, is it, Bev?
Never his fault at all. No. And all this claptrap about kids are being stabbed because they're carrying mobile phones. No, it's not because they're carrying mobile phones.
There is a terrible knife culture in our inner cities, especially in London.
18 teenagers.
It's only when stop and search is properly implemented will we actually bring the numbers down. Do you remember that year? Was it 3 years ago? We brought it down to 8 one year because of hard stop and search. Sadiq Khan said that he would actually end stop and search.
Yes, he did. But he's your Labour mayor. You'll be voting for him this May, and you'll doubtless be campaigning for him, Stephen Pound. But will you be campaigning for him?
Yeah. I will actually be... I'm twinned with Barnet, so I shall be popping up there and doing a fair bit of work up there.
You're sitting on the fence, unlike...
Of course I'm sitting on the fence.
He's going to campaign for
the party.
Yeah.
What do you think I am, a Liberal
Democrat?
campaign
for this terrible mayor, isn't he?
Yeah, why would you do that, Stephen? Why? Name one good thing he's actually done.
What, Sadiq Khan?
Yes.
I think the central London ULEZ was actually a very, very good idea, without a shadow of a doubt, even though it was Boris Johnson's idea.
That was Boris Johnson's idea.
Yeah, but what about the extension and the way it's been implemented?
What are we talking about next?
The Elizabeth line. The Elizabeth. I will give somebody. It may not be him, but the Elizabeth line extension from London, from Paddington out towards Reading and Berkshire
wasn't down to him.
Is good. Probably nothing to do with him. Is
I
it?
think that started under.
It actually goes right back to Ken. I mean, Ken Livingstone increased the number of buses in London, and that was a brilliant piece.
And also the Elizabeth line was late, too, on Transport for London, which has also got no money.
Well, and there's a problem. There's a bag on the line at Acton this morning, which is... It does...
I've done this joke
Were you on there again?
No, it's a shopping bag.
Can we just think about... We interviewed David Davis yesterday, and David Davis said... he wrote this letter to the Conservatives on Andrew Pearce's page in the Daily Mail, and it was basically saying we need unity. And he mentioned on the interview with us yesterday the significance of next year's London mayoral election, because he thinks there are so many people who are unhappy with Sadiq Khan that actually Susan Hall, anybody, could win it for the Conservatives, even though she is not a household name. A lot of people would fail to recognise her if she walked down the street. People might just vote for Susan, and I would support her. I think she's fabulous. When you meet her in real life, we met her at the Tory Party conference. You've done a big interview with her. Has she got any chance, Dawn?
Anything's possible in politics at the moment. Absolutely anything is possible. I think because London is a diverse city, though, and traditionally most of the poorer boroughs, including the one I live in, will vote Labour. There's no chance of most people voting for the Conservative.
But here's the imponderable, Dawn. If an independent stands like...
Yes.
Jane... what was the former Labour leader called? Jeremy Corbyn, or even George Galloway on an anti-Labour stance because Labour won't commit to a ceasefire in Gaza. That would change everything.
I think there are two things. There's two key factors here. One is you're absolutely right, and you're one of the few people who picked up on the by-election that they had in Tower Hamlets. It's quite possible that a large number of those traditional Labour voters, particularly from Pakistan and from Muslim-heavy constituencies, will not vote Labour this time. The second thing is, last time, Susan Hall might well have won because it was transferable vote. This time, it's first past the post. So that means all those people who would say, well, OK, I'll vote for Sadiq, but I'll give her my second preference. It no longer applies. So I don't think she can win at the present time. But I really hope that Sadiq actually does wind his neck in a little bit and shows a little bit more modesty.
I'm terrified by another 5 years under him.
Yeah, why do we have to have a third-term mayor as well? Shouldn't 2 terms be enough?
Sort of Donald Trump would love it, wouldn't he? But
I mean 2 terms is enough, isn't it?
I think so, personally.
And you've got Howard Cox obviously standing for reform in the mayoral election as well, and he will split the vote. As we saw in Uxbridge, the motorist issue is huge.
He's a good candidate, though.
He is. Brilliant candidate. The Conservatives would have loved Howard Cox to stand for them. Let's talk about reform, actually, as we build up to the hour at 11 o'clock. They obviously need to break through Dawn to reach more people to know who they are. Those who know who they are and actually listen to what they say often. Give me an example this Christmas. I had a family member who said, if the election was tomorrow, I would vote for Reform. I had another family member who said, I've never even heard of them. That is the issue, isn't it?
This is the problem. I mean, Richard Tice is predicted to take 10% of the votes. The interesting stat, though, is that if Nigel Farage came back to the party, it'd be 14% of the votes. So I think, and everybody knows who Nigel Farage is. So I think that would make a difference. I was trying to get Nigel to confess this the other day. He goes, oh, I'm still not made up my mind, still not made up my mind. Come on, yes, you have, Nigel. But he wouldn't admit it.
You think he will or he won't? What's your gut instinct?
I think he's seriously tempted.
I don't think he'll run for Parliament again.
No, I think he's seriously tempted.
Because he's lost 7 times. I think there's other things he can do.
I'm not sure. I think, and it will give them that. But what is interesting about what Richard Tice is saying, and I agree with him on this, that, you know, the Tories, in his mind, are a busted flush, so he's going for the Labour vote. And I think for the 2019 Red Wall voters who voted for Boris Johnson, Labour voters voted for Boris Johnson over the whole Brexit thing, I think Richard Tice might be in with a chance of getting them to vote for him.
I completely agree. What do you think?
It's interesting that, I mean, you know, I'm extremely old and I've been in politics a long time, and I can think the 3 most influential politicians, mostly of my time, were actually Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair and Nigel Farage.
Right, I agree.
Nigel Farage absolutely changed the weather.
He did.
I think it would be impossible. I remember talking to him, like, you know, Dawn and I were talking to him once about before he went into the jungle, and he said, no, I'm not doing it, but I am tempted. And I'm hearing exactly the same thing. No, I'm not going to do it, but I am tempted. Look, why would he not? And he did win in it. He got elected to the European Parliament for 20 years. So he has actually won elections, admittedly.
And he nearly won the jungle. And I still think he probably got the most votes. I always think there's skullduggery with these things.
I don't think
they normally issue the voting stats.
They didn't, did they? There were none.
Year, which is suspicious.
And remember, they did try and keep him off air as much as possible. He was censored.
Well, I've said before, you walk down the street with Nigel Farage and the reaction that you get from the public bears no resemblance to the reaction he gets from the British liberal elite media.
Funny enough, the last person I saw do that was walking through Uxbridge with Boris Johnson. I've never seen anything like it.
It's like being with a rock, if you like being with a rock star.
It is.
Oh, it was.
Thatcher had that reaction too, and Blair in his pomp.
Well, I think the mistake politicians of all persuasions are making at the moment is they're putting too much stake in social media. That's not the real world. They're not listening to what the youngsters people are saying.
Don't go anywhere. The Reform Party are going to say who their candidate is for Wellingborough. Is it going to be Nigel Farage? Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Storm Henk has moved away, but we keep the gusty winds today, heavy showers and some brighter interludes. So a mixed bag for most of us. Low pressure still in charge, even if the main storm has moved off the scene. The strongest winds will blow through southwestern parts with coastal gales for Cornwall. And that wind will bring quite frequent showers across most parts of the UK, but especially the south and southwest. Some hail and thunder associated with the more lively downpours, more persistent rain across eastern and northeastern Scotland, and some snow for Shetland, where it will be cold, 1 to 3 Celsius. Elsewhere across the UK, relatively mild. 5 to 9 Celsius in the north, I think more like 9 to 11 Celsius further south. Into the evening, we keep the showers going for some time, especially across northern parts, and the more persistent rain will remain across eastern Scotland. But it does turn drier and clearer across southern parts by the end of the night, and as a result, there'll be a touch of frost in some sheltered rural parts. A chilly start then across southern areas, but that's where the best of the sunshine will be. The sun doesn't last long in the far south. It soon turns cloudy, and by lunchtime, an area of heavy rain moves in across southern coastal counties. And of course, that falling on top of the saturated ground could cause some issues. Further north, sunshine remains across central parts, further showers in Scotland and Northern Ireland.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thank you, Aidan. Now, over the past 12 months, the Reform UK party have doubled their poll rating, with some organisations putting them at 10%. Is it time to consider them a real contender? And they are going to announce their candidate for Wellingborough live here in just a moment. Is it going to be Nigel Farage?
I bet it isn't.
We'll find out next.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 3rd of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Time for Reform. The leader of Reform UK will set out the party's policies any minute now. We're going to bring you that live. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, is already there.
Live here in Westminster, where Reform UK are branding a Labour government Starmageddon and might unveil their plans for the Wellingborough by-election.
Time for the Lib Dems, more like time for a snooze. Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey's doing his own campaigning in Surrey this morning, and he's delivered what has been described as a rousing speech.
And described by who?
Yeah, not by me.
Littler is in the final. He has done it. 16-year-old Luke Littler has reached the World Darts Championship. He takes to the Ocky at 7 o'clock tonight with £500,000 up for grabs. We are behind you, Luke the Nuke, and also Luke Humphries, who he's playing.
Who's another Brit? So, well done, Britain. Travel chaos. Storm Hank brings gales and flooding to England and Wales, and a motorist sadly died after a tree fell on the car he was driving in Gloucestershire yesterday. I'm afraid more bad weather is on the way, with hundreds of flood warnings in place. We'll bring you all the very latest.
We are going to be taking that press conference live with the Reform Party in just a moment. They're going to be announcing a candidate to stand in the by-election in Wellingborough, Northamptonshire. Of course, Peter Bone was kicked out of that seat. And we're going to be waiting to see who it is. Who will the Reform put up as their first candidate? Will it be Nigel Farage?
There'll be a lot of speculation about that. He did so brilliantly in the jungle, didn't he, before Christmas, came third. Despite my votes, I thought he might win.
I thought he might win, but of course Nigel is a divisive figure. He remains a divisive figure, and that will no doubt be on the mind of Richard Tice and the other members of the Reform Party.
He's also, we shouldn't forget, he's lost.
Listen to Nigel.
He has stood 7 times and not won, and you may just think, have I done that?
Yeah. People don't listen to Nigel Farage, unfortunately. They just have a knee-jerk reflex reaction, don't they, to what the papers were writing about him for years. Let's see what you've been saying at home. We've been talking, of course, about the...
He started.
Here's Richard.
Here he goes.
To everybody. And, of course, at a time of New Year, we want to be optimistic. And it's delighted that so many of you have resisted the temptation to join Sir Ed Davey and the Lib Dems on unveiling a poster down in sunny Guildford, because you want to hear what we're up to. We are optimistic politically because, as Alex quite rightly said, this is an election year. Now, let's be clear. The country never voted that it was ready for Rishi. But I am absolutely certain that the country is ready for Rishi to call an election sooner rather than later. Because I'm also certain, and in fact I'm cheerful, I'm optimistic, that the country quite rightly wants to punish the Tories for breaking Britain, because that is what they want to do. I think the country wants to punish them, to oust them, and replace them. The question is what we replace them with. Now, 3 years ago, when I launched Reform UK, the Tories laughed at me. They said, "Why are you bothering? We're getting it sorted." And to coin an expression from my good friend Nigel in the European Parliament, they're not laughing now. No, the truth is the Tories are terrified. Yes, in the new year, the special pleading has already started. Oh, please don't stand here. Please don't stand there. I'm one of the nice guys. I believe in everything that you believe in. You've all broken Britain. You're all responsible. So there's no special deals. We stand in every single seat in England, Scotland, and Wales. Now, of course, the Prime Minister, he likes his maths. He's a technocrat. He likes to mark things. So I thought we ought, first of all, to start by marking his exam report for last year, because he stood up almost exactly a year ago and gave us his 5 pledges, didn't he? You remember those 5? Well, let's just see how he's got on. Stopping the boats. 30,000 illegal migrants later, I think we can mark that down as a fail. Growing the economy. Well, the latest economic data shows that actually the economy is not growing. It's going into reverse. it's getting smaller. So we're going to mark that down as a fail as well. Reducing debt, well, he's failed at that as well. So he wants us all to be good at maths. Well, let's just look at the maths. So far, 3 fails out of 3. He wants to cut the waiting lists. Well, it's not gone so well either, has it, Prime Minister? The waiting lists have gone up. So we're going to mark that as a fail as well. But credit where credit's due. He said he would halve inflation, and inflation has halved. So we'll put that down as a pass. So that's 1 pass out of 5, which we all know is 20%. So in any exam that I suspect any of us have taken part in, 20% is a fail. No ifs, no buts. You might want to resit, but in many schools and colleges, if you're that bad, you wouldn't even be allowed to resit the exam. And that's the point. I think the country, the voters will say, Prime Minister, you're not allowed to continue to run the country. You have failed. And the reason that they've failed, we've got a slide here, is because of what they've done to the country. The truth is, the Tories have become like the Labour Party, 2 sides of the same socialist coin. We've got record high taxes, we've got record high wasteful government spending, and yet disastrous outcomes, whether it's in health, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in housing, trying to see a GP, everything is getting worse. We've got record nanny state regulations. They've utterly failed to take advantage of the great Brexit opportunity that offers so much promise, and still does, with the right leadership. And of course, the biggest betrayal of all by this government is on immigration. They promised, they absolutely promised, election after election, particularly when we were going to get Brexit done, that they would bring down lawful immigration. And yet they've deliberately done exactly the opposite. They've betrayed the people. In particular, they've betrayed Brexit voters and the working class voters. They've opened the borders to mass, uncontrolled immigration of a scale that this country has never seen before. And both economically and culturally, that is not good for the United Kingdom. The other similarity between the 2 main parties, of course, is they're obsessed with the multi-trillion-pound cost of net zero. The problem is, and Rishi has failed in one of his pledges, you cannot grow an economy with the burden of these 5 key factors. And that's why the economy is doing the opposite of what everybody thought. The economy is not growing. It's flatlining. There's no growth. And if there's no growth, you eventually run out of money if you keep increasing spending. So what's the alternative? Well, the country needs a serious wake-up call, because the alternative actually is Starmageddon. Starmageddon is a risk near you in 2024. We are facing a catastrophic cocktail of economic incompetence and cultural pillage that would be a disaster for the United Kingdom. Because, of course, in every Labour government, every socialist way, they want more taxes. They want to take more of your money. Unbelievably, they want to get closer to the failing, sclerotic, recessionary European Union. We've just left it, and thank God we have. Germany's in recession. The EU's going nowhere. And yet Starmageddon wants to take us closer to it. They want more government spending, of course. That's what socialists do. They want more nanny state regulations because they think they know how to control your life better than you do. And, of course, they want to betray the working class. I mean, the Labour Party was founded, supposedly, to protect and promote the working class. But with more mass immigration, you get exactly the opposite. An absolute disaster that has the effect of depressing British wages. And I'll give you an example of that. In the fast food delivery business, all the big fast food companies, they are complicit in allowing massive illegal working, huge illegal working, which is depressing wages of decent British working class people. And that is wrong, but that is the betrayal of the Labour Party. And of course, they're even more obsessed with net zero than the Tories. You cannot grow an economy under this burden. It's never been done before. Now, Jeremy Hunt, the other month, he was sort of celebrating when you had growth of 0.1 or 0.2%. For heaven's sake, man, that's feeble, that's pathetic. I remind people, in the 80s and 90s, the country was growing at 2.5 to 3% plus every single year. We're lucky if we grow at all. And here's the point that nobody's talking about enough. The deficit this year, already at almost 120 billion, is likely to end up by April at 150 billion pounds a year. If you have no growth and you keep spending more than you earn, then next year it'll be between 150 and 200 billion pounds. And eventually the bond markets say, we're done. Enough is enough. No more. You've run out of cash. You've run out of money. You're bankrupt. That is where Starmageddon is taking us, with these key elements. And it is a catastrophe, an absolute cocktail of catastrophic incompetence. So we're crystal clear. Only Reform UK, with our policies, can now save Britain. The key thing is, we've got a cost of living crisis. The fastest and best way, the most helpful way to deal with that is, as I've said before, exactly a year ago, I said, you've got to make work pay. You've got to lift the starting point at which anybody pays any income tax from 12.5 grand to £20,000. That frees up 6 million people from any income tax at all. Net, it's about 30 quid a week. That is a significant difference to millions of households. Of course, there's lots of other taxes we need to cut as well in business, and also things like fuel duty. We should be cutting 20p of every litre of fuel. That will make a huge difference to individuals and to small businesses. And it's brilliant that our fantastic London mayoral candidate, Howard Cox, who's here today, he, of course, has been the champion of freezing fuel duty for many years. We've got to cut the wasteful government spending. It's off the scale. All of us in our households, small businesses, we're looking at our budgets and we're saying, we've got to save 5 quid in 100 without affecting our products, our frontline services, while still paying the bills. If you do that in government, every single manager of every quango, commission, department, council, it soon adds up. Yes, it's well north of £50 billion a year. That's what's got to be done. And of course, you've got to take advantage of the great, brilliant opportunities from Brexit. You've got to cut thousands and thousands of daft EU regulations. The Tories, once again, they promised it. They even got a little bill together to get rid of 4,000 regs. And then the Prime Minister cowardly, feebly bottled it as he cozied up to Ursula von der Leyen. Hopeless. If you're going to do something like Brexit, for God's sake, do it properly. On immigration, we've got to freeze non-essential immigration. One in, one out. That is what the British people vote, I believe. That's what the people want. The British people never voted for mass immigration. And finally, we've got to scrap the totally job-destroying £1 trillion cost of net zero. Just that alone will make people better off. That alone will ease the cost of living crisis. I talk about the betrayal of Labour against the working class. Net zero, every week, every month, is destroying thousands of skilled manufacturing jobs, steel jobs, automotive jobs. They've betrayed their own people. only Reform UK now is the party of the working class, who will stop mass immigration, who will scrap net zero, who will help solve the cost of living crisis. And if we do these things together as a nation, as Alex quite rightly said earlier, if you want change, you've got to vote for it. And if the country votes for this change, then the result will be a high-growth, dynamic economy where all of us feel a great deal better off. Now, we're making great progress. We're going to be ready whenever the election is called. We've got our sort of spring rally. We're bringing it forward a bit, spring, on the 24th of February in Doncaster, so that we're ready, announcing all our hundreds and hundreds of candidates. We're almost there. We're approaching 500 approved and allocated, hundreds more applying as every day goes by. So we will be ready. But the first election is actually just a few weeks away. Yes, there's going to be a by-election in Wellingborough in Northamptonshire, and I'm delighted to say that we have selected our candidate, fantastic, brilliant candidate, who's here today. I'm going to invite him to the stage. He is none other than my joint deputy leader, Ben Habib.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming this morning. I can't really follow Alex's and Richard's exposition of the disaster that has become the governance of this country in any greater detail than they have. But to say just one thing, if I may, what's really been exercising me since 2020, which kept me in the political arena after we ostensibly left the European Union, was an act of complete and utter political weakness by our government. The partitioning of the United Kingdom between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And if you want any one symptom of the utter collapse of British spirit, what we stand for, the cultural, territorial, constitutional, political, economic integrity of our country, it is the Northern Ireland Protocol, and the Windsor Framework, frankly, in my opinion, is even worse than the original document. And we've been lied to repeatedly over that document. We've been told that actually it's the best of both worlds. It isn't. It's the worst of all worlds for Northern Ireland. In 1982, we launched our armed forces to go and protect 1,800 British people 10,000 miles away. Wind the clock on, and we've given up 1.8 million people in Northern Ireland without a single shot being fired, without an insurgency, and without so much as a democratic vote in favour of it. And anyone in this room who thinks that I'm making too much of Northern Ireland totally underestimates what it represents in terms of the collapse of this country. So I was kept in the political arena, essentially, initially for Northern Ireland. But as the years have wound on, and Richard, as I mentioned, explained so clearly, as the years have wound on, this government has brought the United Kingdom to the precipice of economic collapse, cultural collapse, labour market collapse, industrial collapse. You name it, we are facing that problem. And as Margaret Thatcher, I think she was arguably the only decent Conservative Prime Minister we've had since Winston Churchill. As Margaret Thatcher said, and it should be known very well to Rishi Sunak, the problem with is that you eventually run out of other people's money. And that's where we are at. I reluctantly joined Reform UK. I'm sure Richard won't mind me saying that. I reluctantly joined because I'd left the party political system and I was campaigning for Northern Ireland, fighting for a proper Brexit, doing stuff outside a party tent. But I was drawn in eventually to Reform because the only way to make an impact, ultimately, in a democracy is at the polls, in an election. The electoral impact is the only thing that matters in Westminster. And my initial aim, as some of you may recall when I announced my joining Reform UK in March last year, was to obliterate the Tory party. They've beaten me to it. And I take the position extremely responsibly. And The reason I'm standing in Wellingborough is because it's not sufficient anymore simply to defeat the Tories. We have to lead the way. Reform UK has to lead the way and get seats in Parliament. We don't need to get many seats, but if we can get a dozen or more seats in Parliament at the next general election, and a lot of you will be rolling your eyes thinking, oh yeah, fancy chance that. But let me tell you, the political environment is extremely febrile. People are extremely upset. No one thought we'd vote for Brexit, but we did. In fact, there were 4 plebiscites in favour of Brexit, and I think the political sands are shifting in a way that they haven't shifted for years. And it is incumbent, therefore, on Reform UK not to be just a destructive force, but to be a constructive one. And I intend to give Wellingborough by-election the best swing of my bat. And if I am elected, I will stand in the Commons and hold this wretched government to account to the very best of my ability for the people of Wellingborough and the great British people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Bullish talk as ever. Now, before I talk about take some questions from the media, obviously many of you want to know what in this election year are Nigel's plans. He's back from the jungle. He's recovered. Hopefully the stomach is in better shape from the travails of the Bush-Tucker trials. And we've been talking over the Christmas period. And he's obviously giving a lot of thought as to the extent of the role that he wants to play in helping Reform UK, frankly, save Britain. And he is still assessing that, and as and when we have all collectively come to a decision, obviously we look forward to letting everybody know. I'm not a poker player, but I know that a good poker player doesn't show their hand too early. Nigel is the master of political timing, but I'm very clear. The job at hand is so big to save Britain. The more help that Nigel is able to give in the election campaign, frankly, the better. Because the crisis facing the country, the crisis, the catastrophe that would befall us with Starmageddon is really, really serious. So, open to questions. Who would like to kick off first? There's a hand early there, sir.
Hi. So that was the much vaunted press conference. Both Bev and I have quite strong views on what Richard Tice had to say in that rather long, windy speech. But first, we're going to have a short break.
Yeah, and GB News' regular Ben Habib is the candidate for Wellingborough. We'll let you know what we think. Don't go anywhere.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
11:26 with Britain's news from GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, we've just been listening to the Reform UK press conference this morning. Richard Tice stood up on stage, of course, the leader of Reform UK, and he announced that the candidate for Wellingborough, which is the seat that Peter Bone obviously lost, will be Ben Habib. You will all know Ben Habib. He's a regular on GB News. He was a Brexit MEP. What did you make of Richard's speech?
I thought it was too long, and I think it should have been punchier. It should have been not so much about what's wrong with the Tory party. We know what's wrong with the Tory party. That's why they're 20 points behind in the polls, or 17 points behind in the polls. And it should have been punch, punch, punch. This is what we will do, and this is why we will do it differently.
Yeah.
Didn't seem to be anything new in it.
We were rooting for him, but I think it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I do think it was a missed opportunity. I like people coming in to disrupt the political landscape. I do. I think we need that. We never needed it more than we need it right now. But in fact, Ben Habib used a great line when he stood up on stage and he said, it's not about destruction. I think he said it's about construction and bringing a positive new vision for the country. But they have a big hill to climb. Well, joining us now is former Conservative MP Neil Parish. Morning, Neil. Great to see you. Just give us your assessment, really, of that presentation by Reform UK. It's a general election year. They've got to get this sort of stuff right.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Tice, as you quite rightly said, was very, very, hard on the Tories with all the problems that are there. And, of course, some of the solutions of, knocking back people not paying tax up to 20,000 and knocking off 20p off of fuel. None of this stuff was all costed, and so it was a sort of great rant against the Tories. But I'm afraid not a lot of substance. And I think, but where I think the Tory MPs listening really need to wake up was when Richard said, I am not going to take special plea bargaining. Tory MPs are very right wing, very much on the reform wing of the party. I'm still going to stand candidates against them. So, the Tory party's got to wake up. The Reform Party is a real challenge. People are fed up with immigration. They're fed up with what's going on. They're fed up with the situation in Northern Ireland. So they picked off a lot of things which people are really upset with. Now, I think the by-election is going to be interesting as well, because Peter Bone, you see, very much on the right of the party. It will be interesting to see whether they would be able to win that. And, of course, interesting when they go on and say, of course, we are very concerned about Labour, because I would argue they are one of the reasons that Labour will get in. And, of course, that's what the Tory party will do come the general election. And it'll depend when we get to the general election how much people want to get rid of the Tories and how much they trust Labour to run the government, because the one people that are not going to run the government after the general election are Reform. So it's a very interesting time, but there's a real threat to Tory MPs, and they must unite and come together. Otherwise, they are absolute toast, because the more we fight each other, the more we have kamikaze pilots exploding their planes and their fleets. We will not hold.
The thing is, Neil, obviously, the assumption is that Reform UK appeals to the right because they're very much about closing down the borders, perhaps, and a lower tax and competition and putting the individual at the middle centre of decision-making. However, that very powerful policy that they've had from really almost from day one as to not paying any tax until you earn £20,000, which will help students on part-time jobs. It will help the elderly on part-time jobs. It will help parents on part-time jobs. The lower paid. That's such a powerful policy. And yet so therefore that should appeal to the left. That might appeal to the red wall, but somehow they're not pushing that hard enough, are they?
No, they're not, because I'm a great believer, have been all my political life, to take, those that are earning very little, let's take them out of tax altogether, because then naturally their money goes further. So, yes, it'll be interesting to see what Hunt does in the budget. They've got one last throw of the dice, really, with the budget coming up. And I think people will, when it comes to the general election, then give it real thought. And I think that, the idea that what the Tory party mustn't do, and they're doing the same as they did between 92 and 97, absolutely destroying themselves, you see. And if they carry on doing that, and every MP in 97 had a different idea of how to run the government, and they all went out with the tide. And I think Tory MPs need to learn the lesson of 92 to 97, and they want to wake up to the fact that reform is a real threat, and they need to get out there, get the right policies, campaign hard, and they might yet pull the rabbit out of the bag, but the rabbit is a very long way down in that bag.
And if you think about history, of course, Neil, in the run-up to the 97 general election, David Davis wrote this big open letter to Tory MPs, which I'm sure you saw yesterday. He made the point in the run-up to the 92 election, the Tory party fought Labour in the form of Neil Kinnock. In the run-up to 1997, they fought each other. The result was disastrous. Blair's biggest landslide, 179 seats. They seem, some of them, these Tory MPs, in my view, to have a death wish.
Yeah, they seem to be suffering from amnesia, aren't they? And they can't seem to remember what happened. And I think political parties, when they sort of stay in the doldrums and they stay 20 points behind and more in the opinion polls, they just get scared and they just don't act rationally. And the Tory party at the moment, some of the MPs just are not acting rationally. They've got to come together, fight together. The old adage, you either win together or you die all together, and I think that's got to be fought. But I think at the moment there's a lack of realism. Now, I think 24 is D-Day. There's going to be an election. All right, you could go to January 25, but that's desperation. It will be, I suspect, October and November this year. And I think, we got that chance for people to come together. But don't underestimate reform, and don't try doing any deals with reform either, because Richard made that absolutely clear, because that's what a lot of them will be up to, you see. The more right we are, the more chance we won't have a reform candidate standing against us. Well, he made it absolutely clear, wherever he's got candidates, he's going to put them. And let's wake up and smell the coffee.
All right, thank you, Neil. Neil Parish there, always good to see you, former Conservative MP. I'm trying to look at what you're saying at home. Email us now while we listen to the news and we can have a look at them.
And do you think that cat phrase about Starmer's going to catch on? I've already forgotten.
Starmageddon.
Is that a great headline? It might make some headlines.
It's all right.
But again, if it was a big thrust in the speech, it was almost fleeting.
Yeah, it was. It was. Let us know your thoughts. I'm dying to know what you made of it. gbviews@gbnews.com. Did the Reform Party set out enough of their policy for you there to give them your vote? Are you going to give them your vote anyway because you don't like either Labour or the Conservatives or the Lib Dems?
With their new poster.
We haven't talked about their new poster enough. We will do that.
It's fascinating.
And a lot more in the next 25 minutes. First, though, your news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. 11:34. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Junior doctors in England have walked off the job in the health service's longest ever strike. An unprecedented 6 days of industrial action has begun after talks with the government and the BMA union broke down. Junior doctors want a 35% pay rise, which would restore their real earnings to levels seen in 2008. The government says that's unaffordable, but insisted late yesterday the door remained open for further negotiation. Dr Robert Lawrenson is the BMA's Junior Doctors Committee co-chair. He says the strikes will continue until pay is improved.
We're very happy to talk about restoring our pay over a matter of years. We're very happy to do that over a period of time frame, and we don't necessarily need it all in one go. We're happy to sit down and have a collaborative conversation with the government, but they've pushed us out of the negotiation room. They don't want to talk with us, and the fact of the matter is the nurses rejected their pay deal. The nurses are still in dispute with the government, and to be honest, the whole country have abandoned our nursing colleagues as well.
A motorist has died after a tree fell on the car he was driving in yesterday as strong winds and heavy rain battered the UK. Gloucestershire police say the 50-year-old died near Kemble. Transport delays continue today as well as the clean-up following Storm Henk continues. Flood warnings remain in place, particularly in parts of Birmingham, Leicester and Northampton. And Luke Littler will make history tonight when he becomes the youngest player to compete in the final of the World Darts Championship. At just 16, he beat Rob Prost 6-2 in the semi-finals last night. He showed nerves of steel as he closed out the match in style, continuing his dream run into tonight's big tournament when he takes on the new world #1, Luke Humphries. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2630 and €1.1559. The price of gold, £1,626.58 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 at 7,684 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, Lib Dem leader Ed Davey says that his party is the Tory removal service. I mean, look, if this... it's comedy. If you're listening on the radio, it's like an Only Fools and Horses style white van with a poster on the back, and Ed Davies driving it.
He's driving the van with his orange
orange
high-vis jacket. He obviously nicked that from George Osborne. He was always in one when he was Chancellor, wasn't he?
They could not have made this look any cheaper. He's got Ed Davies, Tory removals poster, Time's Up, picture of Rishi Sunak, and he gets out of his van in his orange tabard and he waves like a low-rent builder.
Yeah, it's just really, really poor. Notice he's Ed Davies, Tory removers, not Sir Ed. They want to drop the knighthood, don't they?
Your vote Liberal Democrat. I mean, come on. Come on. Let us know what you think
They'll be talking about nothing else in the dog and duck.
It's comedy in his little white van with his rubbish poster.
Yeah.
It's a paper poster. Does he not know it's 2023?
I know. I bet you it's not even a British van either. You should find out.
Oh, right, Ed Davies, Tory removal. Because also it's ridiculous, because they're not actually going to kick Rishi Sunak out of 10 Downing Street. So what a stupid thing.
I know.
You're punishing us. You're promising us that as well. You're promising us something you can't deliver. Oh, honestly, right, it's time for a cup of tea and a digestive. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:42 with Britain's News and on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Lib Dem.
I'm still recovering from that Lib Dems. We're going to look at it in a minute, the Lib Dems poster on the back of the truck, in very high tech. Tara has got in touch with us on email saying attacking other parties is not the way to go, Reform. That's what we're sick of. Jamie says Richard Tice is very wise not to forewarn the enemy of his intentions. Sorry about that. Watch this space. Richard knows what he's doing.
You've got to give us a bit more if you do a big set-piece press conference. John says Reform really need to target the Red Wall, where they're calling it...
Starmageddon.
Right.
And Nada said Richard's speech was good, as the voters need to show that Reform are going to address what the Tories have failed at. He pointed that out. Rishi doesn't seem to want to bring immigration down, as I suspect he is in cahoots with big business. And, of course, they rely on low wages to keep their profits up.
And Joe says, I don't think Tice has what it takes to challenge the Tories. Well, interesting. We've got our panel back. What do they think? Stephen Pound?
We've got to show you this. Can we just, for a moment, just indulge me a little?
Because we know Dawn Neeson is gagging to see this.
Ed Davey has also been campaigning
the man who would be Prime Minister.
Let's have a listen to what he had to say first.
Here it is, 2024, the year the voters finally get to pack up this awful, out-of-touch Conservative government, throw their disastrous policies into the skip, clean up the sleaze stains from the carpet, and eventually move the whole lot out of number 10.
So that was
a laboured analogy about removals, wasn't it?
That was him talking this morning. Now, this was also... OK, just watch this, right?
Here it is.
Stephen Pound, I want your commentary.
Well,
so this is him
well,
coming
he just
round
drove
the
over the curb.
He just drove over the curb.
He's trying to do a right turn, but he can't quite manage it. But I don't say, you think with the Liberals' record of road traffic offences, the last thing he'd want to do is to get behind the wheel of an HGV.
Dawn, have you ever seen anything so low rent in your life?
Well, in an endless list of low rent political stunts, this is pretty much it. But hey, at least it's got the high-vis vest on.
Yeah. Do you think he borrowed it from George Osborne?
Yeah, well, you can't lead a party unless you're wearing a high-vis vest.
Yeah. It's up there with the Edstone, isn't it?
It is, really.
Oh.
So Ed Davey's Tory removals, time's up, with a picture of Rishi Sunak in front of number 10. It's ridiculous. Why would you give such a great big photograph of Rishi Sunak?
Your rival.
Why would you do that?
Well, I think he's
not
been
a
very
bad-looking
liberal
bloke.
there. Yeah. No, I mean, most people just see, oh, there goes Rishi Sunak. Yes, I think I'll vote Conservative.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's extraordinary.
And plus, I mean, the driving was appalling.
It was.
I was just going to say,
with the curve. Did he have his seatbelt
My
on?
dad was an HGV driver, and he'd be having a heart attack.
I know. I hope. And I will be checking, of course, to make sure it's British made, that lorry.
But did you see that? He did the right turn in the wrong lane.
Yes.
So the Liberal... This is a metaphor for the Liberal Democrats. Yeah, they've strayed into the right lane by mistake.
And there he is, standing in front of the poster, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Yeah.
It's not even an unflattering picture of Rishi Sunak. It looks quite nice. In front of 10 Downing Street door, Ed Davies, Tories removals. I'm just checking they got the apostrophe right. They did. That was a risk.
It's not demonised, is it? Yeah.
Honestly.
But the thing is, most people don't even know who Ed Davies is. So you say they can see that. They can see.
You see, you said Ed Davies.
It's Davey.
Davey, whatever.
Well, no, Dawn, that says it all.
Yeah, exactly. No one knows who he is.
And there's a huge crowd of about 12 people
and
stood in a car park in Guildford. And he's just given a warm embrace
to a very nice lady with glasses and blonde hair. No idea. It's not Mrs. Davey or Lady Davey, because he is Sir Ed.
Right, yes, of course, yes.
And you know what's so disappointing as well? Like, over the last 3 years, these guys who are meant to be about liberalism and democracy were the people who, I know you'll say shush, but during the pandemic there was an opportunity for a party to come in and represent things like individual freedom and bodily autonomy, and they just badly let down even that side of the rhetoric.
People are going to vote for them because they don't know who else to vote for, certainly in the West Country.
Yeah.
They don't want to vote Conservative, they don't want to vote Labour, they're going to vote Lib Dem. They don't even know what they stand for.
Enter Reform.
Enter Reform, which is a beautiful segue, thank you, Stephen, into what we heard.
Isn't that a mobile scooter?
Richard and Ben Habib say just a moment ago in their press conference. I personally think that was a little bit of a missed opportunity for Richard Tice. It needed tightening up that speech.
Well, I think it was actually a better speech than I expected, because he was pretty passionate in a lot of places. What was the interesting thing, Dawn and I were watching it there, and we were actually marking down how many times he said working class. And I think we got up to 8 times mention of the working class.
A bit out of date.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as the working class.
Exactly. Everybody, I mean, you know, people from our background who were from a working class background would never say, I'm working class.
No.
You just wouldn't say that.
No.
You know, it's like, you know, people from our background would keep the front room clean and tidy, but you'd never say, I'm not working class.
Yeah.
It's you're aspirant. But, I mean, I think introducing Ben Habib as the candidate for Wellingborough, I mean, that was pretty much what it was all about. But then the references to Nigel Farage, it was showing a bit of leg there, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't it? What did you think, Dawn?
I thought it wasn't too bad. I mean, you know, the mantra you come away with is the word working class, Brexit, stopping migration, and they're the things that are going to appeal to the disaffected red wall, former Labour, last 2019 election Tory voters. That's who he's aiming for, isn't he?
Yeah.
And those words were used constantly throughout, and we know that repetition in a speech works to get that point over.
But as a journalist, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm fascinated to know your insight into this. Andrew said as well, where are your pull quotes?
Yeah.
Where is the line you're going to put in your column?
Wasn't bad.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was too bad, to be honest with you. But no, there was no standout, right, get that on the front page, that's a great headline.
There was no great new policy. Now, maybe they're doing what Starmer's doing, hiding their light under a bushel, but there was no new policy. We already know about you won't pay tax until you're earning £20,000.
Well, I think there was one, Andrew. I mean,
what was it?
The thing, the Trésor de Clerc, because I think when he talked about one in and one out, and that is a facile, nonsensical. In terms of immigration, he's saying one in, one out. Anybody with half an ounce of wit would know that simply is impossible.
Well, he said
it's a soundbite.
It doesn't even work with car parks.
Well, no,
does it?
No,
You've all sat in a queue at NCP and it's one in, one out.
It didn't work on the queue for the embankment on New Year's Eve. But,
exactly.
I mean, the point being that it's that sort of soundbite that he needs.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it doesn't stand up to any sort of examination whatsoever.
Ben Habib, however, is a very impressive orator. He talks from the heart. He's a successful, self-made man. And I think that is a very, very impressive... It's a good choice for this by-election, but you're not convinced the by-election is going to take place, are you, Andrew?
Well, the by-election has to take place. A writ has to be moved, and it hasn't been moved yet. So there's another potential by-election taking place in Blackpool. They might do it together. But if the Tories have an election in May, they can kick this can down the road till March, by which time Parliament's prorogued. There won't even be a blooming by-election.
Well, there's not going to be an election in May, not a general election in May.
You never know.
I don't think there is at all.
I'll put money on it. But you know, I know quite a few Tory MPs, and they're not going to give up 80 grand a year knowing that they're going...
Well, it's not up to them, Stephen. Did you not notice?
Of course it is.
It's a gift of the Prime Minister.
Exactly.
And they make the decisions selfishly for their own personal reasons.
Indeed, with involving the 1922 committee and involving the whip's office. And, you know, believe you me, the whips will be saying, look, there's no appetite. Plus, the main thing is the Mr. McCorber thing. Something will turn up. You know, inflation is coming down. You know, thanks be to the gods of the weather. You know, the amount of boats coming here and going.
But then you have a hot June, a hot July, a hot August, and the boats surge across the channel.
They're predicting a record high,
and that would be a record, and that would be
Unless-
catastrophic.
Unless a plane has taken off to Rwanda
Which would be
by
great.
June and July.
With 30,000 people on board.
That's what it's
Then
like.
come back.
That's it's Rwanda. If it gets one plane with God knows how many Home Secretaries on it, we've sent more, haven't we, infamously, off to Rwanda, then that will maybe.
Do you think it would be a game
Andrew, I think where there's a possibility, right, there is the council elections in May and the mayoral elections in the big cities. It could well be that they will piggyback on that, and because I think they've written off both Wellingborough and Blackpool South.
Oh, I'm sure they have.
So they're quite actually like it's a good day to bury bad results.
But if they pull off an unlikely victory in May in London, they go in June.
Isn't it also something about if you're the incumbent party, you want the election in bad weather as opposed to good weather?
I think that's pretty old-fashioned.
No, the myth was the Tories, because back in the old days, you know, Labour didn't have cars, the Tories did. So in bad weather, they'd come out and vote.
And so many people vote by post now.
I know.
Right.
It's ridiculous. You know, when I first got involved in politics, we'd sit outside the polling station asking for the polling cards. We had these things called reading pads. And so we could. Nobody
Queen Victoria was on the stamps.
Indeed. Well, no, we hadn't actually quite got that advanced yet. We still had sticks with letters stuck in the top.
I think with November as well, you're going to have less young people going out to vote in November.
That was
there was a recent poll, wasn't there, about so many
that would suit the Tories.
And the elderly as well.
But it's also linked with the American
with the presidential election.
Yeah, exactly.
First week in November.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised early autumn, maybe September, October. I'm thinking.
Well, shall we put our money on the table now? I bet you a bullseye. It's November.
You won't pay. You're from the Labour Party.
Should we just do one full story before we have to wrap up?
Exactly.
So, Andrew, that was an aspiration, not a firm commitment.
Right.
Can we just talk about Gary Lineker's power at the BBC?
Do we have to?
Dawn, what has he made the BBC do?
Well, absolutely.
Pay him a fortune.
Wayne Rooney was sacked by Birmingham City and BBC
Yes, that went well, didn't it?
Yeah, well,
being a football manager.
BBC Sport put out a tweet saying, by order of the Peaky Blinders, Wayne Rooney has been sacked by Birmingham City. And Gary Lineker instantly responded, delete this.
And worse still, the BBC did.
And they did. And they absolutely did. And it's like, what?
So basically, this was the image. This was the image of Wayne Rooney in a flat cap and his suit, and he looks a bit like a character out of the TV show
Which
Peaky
was based in
Blinders,
Birmingham, of course.
Which is about gangsters. And so that's the BBC have done that with the slightly tongue-in-cheek. It's the sports department. I don't mind the sports department making a jokey tweet about this. How can Gary Lineker have the power to dictate to the social media department of the BBC not to put that out?
Yeah, I think we're actually losing sight of the fact. It's a great shame that Wayne Rooney is now joined to Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard and so many other really great players who've turned out not to be particularly good managers. But I think not for the first time you put your finger on it. What authority, what power, what strength? You know, can you never criticise Gary Lineker? Say, take this down, do this, do that. You know, jump how high? I mean,
extraordinary. He is running the BBC. I mean, they are terrified of him. I mean, you know, no matter what you think of Carol Vorderman, she left the BBC because of her very strong political opinions.
Yeah, she was told to leave, effectively.
Yeah, Gary Lineker does the same thing, and he's still there.
But
why is that?
The BBC's in a strange place. Do you see Misha Hussain interviewing? Did you hear that? You know, she said the S word. You know,
7 times in 8 minutes.
I mean, I have to say, it's amazing. You're listening to that, and you can hear her going, you know, S. What? This is the BBC, of Lord Reith, of newsreaders in dinner jackets. What's going on here?
We wouldn't be allowed to say the S word every few seconds.
And I didn't. I saw you look worried for a minute, but I didn't.
We have a broader vocabulary than people at the BBC.
I tell you what, though,
darling. Well, some of us
sometimes I've wanted to, almost every hour. But anyway, not because of you lot. Stephen, Dawn, Newsroom.
Because of me.
Thank you. Occasionally because of you. That's it from Britain's Newsroom for this morning. We're handing over now to Emily and Tom with Good Afternoon Britain. We will see you tomorrow morning at 9:30.
See you then.
Coming up on the show, the firing gun has been started, or launched, or shot on the general election campaign. Both the Lib Dems and Reform UK. Our political editor, Chris Hope, speaking to the leader of Reform UK very soon.
And will Luke the Nuke Littler win? Become the world champion at the darts? We'll be there live as crowds begin to gather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Storm Henk has moved away, but we keep the gusty winds today, heavy showers and some brighter interludes. So a mixed bag for most of us. Low pressure still in charge, even if the main storm has moved off the scene. The strongest winds will blow through southwestern parts with coastal gales for Cornwall. And that wind will bring quite frequent showers across most parts of the UK, but especially the south and southwest. Some hail and thunder associated with the more lively downpours, more persistent rain across eastern and northeastern Scotland, and some snow for Shetland, where it will be cold, 1 to 3 Celsius. Elsewhere across the UK, relatively mild. 5 to 9 Celsius in the north, I think more like 9 to 11 Celsius further south. Into the evening, we keep the showers going for some time, especially across northern parts, and the more persistent rain will remain.